Hello everyone. The next topic which we will be studying is about the human respiratory system. So human respiratory system is a network of organs and tissues that helps us to breathe. So the respiratory system, which means there is a process of respiration which is going on in the human body. So the primary function here is to introduce the oxygen into the body and expel carbon dioxide from the body. So this is the main function of the respiratory system, that it will introduce the oxygen. It will take the oxygen from the atmosphere and release the carbon dioxide from the body to back to the atmosphere. So this is the human respiratory system. So this is the basic definition of the human respiratory system, that it is a network of organs. The network of organ comprises of the lungs, nose, larynx, pharynx. Then there are alveoli, trachea, and bronchi. So these are all the organs of the human respiratory system, and the tissues help us breathe. So the tissue that is involved in the human respiratory system help us to breathe. The main function, as I have already told you, that it's the main function here is to introduce the oxygen into the body and expel the carbon dioxide from the body. Now, human respiratory system consists of group of organs and tissues that will help us to breathe, aside from the lungs. So, if the human respiratory system comes in the mind, the lungs is the first organ which is there. So, besides the lungs, there are various other organs which are involved in the human respiratory system. There are also muscles, and there is a vast network of blood vessels that facilitate the process of the respiration. Now this is the diagrammatic representation of the human respiratory system. So as you can see, this is a nasal cavity, that is the nose. So from here we breathe, and then comes the larynx and the pharynx. So larynx and the pharynx, they are the components of the human respiratory system. Then from here the oxygen, the from here the gas, that the oxygen or carbon dioxide goes from here, it will be transported to the lungs, and there are various bronchioles that are being there, and there are various alveoli, and there is a diaphragm that helps in the contraction and relaxation when the lungs take in the gases and breathe out the gases. So this is the overall representation of the human respiratory system and all the organs that are comprises of the human respiratory system. Now, what are the features of this human respiratory system? The features are the energy that is being generated by the breakdown of glucose molecules in all the living cells of the human body. So the energy is being generated when there is a breakdown of glucose. So the breakdown of glucose will ultimately lead to the release the production of the ATP. ATP, it is in the form of energy. Oxygen is inhaled. So first oxygen is inhaled and transported to various parts, and it is used for burning the food particles at the cellular level in a series of chemical reactions. So the oxygen is being inhaled and the carbon dioxide is exhaled. So this is the basic function of the respiratory system. The obtained glucose molecules that are used for discharging energy is in the form of the ATP. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So that is the ATP. When there is a breakdown of glucose molecules, that will ultimately release the energy in the form of the ATP. Now there are various parts of the human respiratory system. And what are these parts? That are nose, larynx, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. So all these parts were also displayed in the figure that was being shown in the previous slide. So next is we will discuss about the functions of the different parts of the respiratory system. Now what are the functions here? The functions include, so the humans, they have exterior nostrils, and that are being divided by the framework of cartilaginous structure called the septum. So the nose which you can see outside the body is the nose, from where we inhale the oxygen and exhale the carbon dioxide. So this is the structure that separates the right nostril from the left nostril. So as you can see, the nose, they have the two nostrils, that is the right one and the left one. And in the nose there are tiny hair follicles that cover the interior lining of the nose. Why there is a hair in the interior lining of the nose? Because it will act as a first line of defense against the foreign pathogens. So it will not allow the foreign pathogens to enter in our lungs. So it will be the first line of defense for the foreign pathogens. Furthermore, they provide additional humidity for inhaled air. So they will also provide the humidity for the inhaled air. So next comes is the larynx. So larynx is, it was being displayed in the diagrammatic representation also, that the larynx was being displayed here. This windpipe or larynx is being displayed on this. So larynx is also called the voice box. Informally it is called the voice box because it is found in the front of the neck and it is responsible for the vocals as well as aiding the respiration. So the voice generation is through the larynx and the respiration part will also be through the larynx. So when the food is swallowed, a flap which is called as the epiglottis, it folds on the top of the windpipe and prevents the food from entering the larynx. So there is an epiglottis which is present on the larynx, and it will, what is the function of that? It will fold over the top of the windpipe so that the food will not enter the larynx. Next is the pharynx. So there is a nasal chamber which opens up into a wind hollow space which is called the pharynx. So it is a common passage for air as well as the food. It functions by preventing the entry of the food particles into the windpipe. So have you ever wondered why we cough when we eat or swallow? Because talking while we eat or swallow may sometimes result in coughing. And the reason behind this reaction is the epiglottis. It is forced to open for the air to exit outwards and the food enters into the windpipe, triggering a cough. So that the food will not get into the windpipe, it will trigger a cough. So the epiglottis here is an elastic cartilage which serves as a switch between the larynx and the esophagus. So they both, the esophagus and the windpipe, they are almost close to each other. So there the role of epiglottis comes in because it allows the epiglottis will not force to open for the air to exit outwards, and the food will not enter here. It will result in the coughing. So the larynx and the esophagus, they allow passage of air into the lungs and food into the gastrointestinal tract. So this is the main function here, that both the air will get in the lung and the food will in the gastrointestinal tract, that is in the digestive system part. Next is trachea. So the trachea is also known as the windpipe, and it rises below the larynx which moves down to the neck. So the windpipe is present, rises below the larynx and moves down to the neck. So the walls of the trachea, they are comprised of C-shaped cartilaginous ring which gives hardness to the trachea and maintain it by completely expanding. So they maintain it by completely expanding, and further down into the breastbone to split into two bronchi of the each lung. So as you can see, the here is, if for example is a windpipe, it will be divided into the two parts for the lungs. So that is the, it splits into two bronchi for each one lungs. So this is how the trachea look like. Now the bronchi. So the bronchi, the trachea, the trachea that splits into two tubes is called the bronchi, where enter each lung individually. So that enters the each lung individually. So bronchi they divide into two things, that is the secondary and the tertiary bronchioles. and it further branches out into small air sac like alveoli. So it was being displayed in the figure which we have shown in the first slide itself. So the alveoli, they are single cell sacs of air with thin walls. So they have thin walls and they are sac of air. They are responsible for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide molecules into or away from the bloodstream. So that is the main function here, that it will lead to the exchange of the gases, that is the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Lungs, that is considered as the last part of the respiratory system because it is the primary organ for the respiration in humans and other vertebrates. So here the exchange of gases takes place. Where the lungs are located. So the lungs are located on either side of the heart in the thoracic cavity of the chest. So it is located in the chest and either side of the heart. Anatomically, the lungs, they are spongy organs which with an estimate total surface of about 50 to 75 square meters. So the average total surface of the lungs is 50 to 75 square meters. And the primary function is to facilitate the exchange of gases between the blood and the air. So this is the main function of the lungs. Now, there are some other respiratory functions as well. So we will be discussing each of this. We will be discussing each of these in detail. So first we will discuss is about the exchange of gases between the bloodstream and the body tissues. So the blood, they carries the oxygen from the lungs around the body, and it releases the oxygen when it reaches the capillaries. So oxygen is diffused through the capillary walls into the body tissues, and the carbon dioxide also diffuses in the blood and is carried back to the lungs for the release. So this is the exchange of gases between the bloodstream and the body tissues. The next is inhalation and exhalation. So inhalation and exhalation means when the air is inhaled, that means that when the air is inhaled in the body, and exhaled, for example, when the carbon dioxide is exhaled, so it is out of the body. So the respiratory system helps in the breathing. The air inhaled through the nose moves through the pharynx, larynx, trachea and into the lungs. Whereas when the air is exhaled, it is through the same pathway. And changes in the volume and pressure in the lungs aid in the pulmonary ventilation. So this is the inhalation and exhalation process. Now the vibration of the vocal cords. So while speaking, the muscles in the larynx, they move the cartilage. So these cartilage, they push the vocal cords together. And during exhalation, when the air passes through the vocal cord, it makes them vibrate and creates the sound. So this is also the main function, that it helps in making the sound. Next is exchange of gases between the lungs and the bloodstream. So inside the lungs, what is happening? The oxygen and carbon dioxide, they enters and exit respectively through millions of microscopic sacs called alveoli. So the inhaled oxygen diffuses into the pulmonary capillaries and binds to the hemoglobin, and it is pumped through the bloodstream. The carbon dioxide from the blood, that diffuses in the alveoli and is expelled through the exhalation. So this is also a main function. Now olfaction or smelling, that is also an important function of the respiratory system. So during the inhalation process, when the air enters the nasal cavities, that is the nose, there are some chemicals that are present in the air and bind to it and activate the receptors of the nervous system of the cilia. So the signals, they are sent to the olfactory bulbs via the brain. So in this way we can smell or respond to any smell. So respiration is one of the metabolic processes which plays an essential role in all the living organisms. However, lower organisms like the unicellular one, they do not breathe like humans, so they do not have a proper respiratory system like the humans have. Instead, they utilize the process of diffusion. For example, earthworms, they have a moist cuticle which helps them in the gaseous exchange. And respiration in fish occurs through these special organs called the gills. So most of the higher organisms possess a pair of lungs for the breathing. So for example, in humans, there is a pair of lungs which helps in the breathing process or in the overall respiratory process. So these are some of the references. Thank you.